On July 24th, 2024, thousands of Americans gathered around the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. to protest Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to Congress. These protests were widely covered by American media and ended with a group of the protesters getting pepper sprayed and tear gassed shortly before they burned an American flag and spray painted public property. But before any of that happened, I traveled down to the protests with a goal of finding out what kind of people made up the protest movement. I found and spoke to a wide range of people, including avowed socialists, rabbis, Islamists, anti-Islamists, moderate Muslims, ex-Evangelical Christians, doctors, and even a Holocaust survivor. All had different perspectives, but were there for the same reason: to end the war in Gaza and the Israeli occupation of Palestine.
I'll be taking you through all of it. I'm Jay Klein, and welcome to The Black Sheep.
The first protest I found in the morning was a Jewish prayer service led by the organization Trua. Since October 7th, I've seen footage online of prayer-based protests organized by the group Jewish Voices for Peace. In that footage, protesters wore Jewish religious garb, but in ways that, as someone raised in Judaism, appeared to me to be unaligned with religious doctrine, seemingly using the garb more as a costume than for authentic religious practice. This was not that. I was raised Orthodox, and as such I'm unaccustomed to services led by female rabbis, but otherwise the services appeared relatively standard. The protest included some Israeli flags, with the group representing the far-left position within the Israeli political spectrum. In Israel itself, left-wing Israelis have also been protesting Netanyahu and calling for an end to the war. I spoke with one of the rabbis leading the group.
My name is Danny Zemmel. I'm a rabbi at a synagogue here in Washington, D.C., and I also happen to be the chairman of the board of Trua, Rabbis for Human Rights, which are sponsoring this prayer moment as a protest to Prime Minister Netanyahu speaking before Congress.
So can you tell me a little bit about Trua, what you guys stand for, and are you always working on sort of Israel issues, or is it a broader organization and this is just part of your portfolio?
We are a rabbinic human rights organization that work on issues both domestically in terms of the United States, fair labor, fair wages, immigration, refugees, variety of issues, democracy, advocacy, all across the country. And then also we have a portfolio that deals, since we are a rabbinic organization, with human rights in Israel, and we actually have staff in Israel also. And we bring rabbi groups to Israel, other groups to Israel as well. We are a passionately pro-Israel community. I was raised as a passionate Zionist. I mean, I think there's no more passionate Zionist in North America than I am. And I think what has set me on this path is I strongly disagree with many of the policies of this current Netanyahu government. So I think it's a very Jewish, a very Zionist, a very pro-Israel path.
Okay, yes, I'm noticing your sign says Hamas out of Gaza, Bibi out of office. Yeah, if you can point that to the camera. Free Israel, free Palestine, two states living in peace. So, yeah, so you're right. You're making it very clear here that this is not anti-Israel. This is pro-peace. It feels like from a lot of what I've seen and what I've personally experienced is that if you don't go 100% all in to supporting the Netanyahu government and supporting everything about Israel, you're painted as just pure anti-Israel, that you want Israel's destruction, stuff like that. What would you say back to somebody who goes along those lines?
That I disagree with you. The same way I want a better America, I want a better Israel. Does anybody expect any American to agree with every single policy of the American government? Does it make me anti-American if I support something that the Congress and the president don't support? If Congress won't pass an immigration bill, am I anti-American if I'm advocating for a sane immigration bill? The same moral compass I bring to being an American citizen, I bring to being a Jew. In fact, my moral compass comes from my being a Jew. So I feel like that opinion, there's something obscenely absurd about it.
What reception would you say you've received from the Jewish community at large? Like, how much do you think what's going on here represents.
There are many members of my synagogue here participating in this service. So in terms of my congregation, I think the vast majority of North American Jews feel in ways that are very, very similar to the way I feel. I think American Jews believe in a two-state solution. I think American Jews do not see the point at this point in the war. It seems to be a war of vengeance, not a war with a strategic purpose. And the time has come to make a deal that'll bring the hostages home, which I think is the first responsibility of any government, to take care of its own citizens, and then to work out a better future for Israel. It seems to me that if you like war, then your answer is more of the same. In other words, what the Israeli government has been pursuing. We need tighter border, stronger army, better defense against tunnels, but eventually there's going to be another war. So if your thing is, if you like war, in favor of warfare, okay, keep pursuing these policies. If you want a different path, then it takes different strategic thinking. I want different strategic thinking because I want a peaceful future for the people of Israel. I think divides are hard to heal, but it takes patience and it takes conversation and mutual understanding and coming together in being able to listen to a wide range of different opinions and not get dug in, but being open-minded. I also think, quite frankly, it takes going to Israel a lot and seeing the reality on the ground. I think the more people go to Israel and see the reality and tour the West Bank and see the reality of what the occupation has wrought, people will come to the necessity for a different understanding for a future of Israel. What I say all the time, there are different ways to tour this country. You can tour the United States. A foreigner comes to this country, and you can tour the United States and land in New York and go immediately to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. You can then go to an airplane and go to New England and see beautiful New England colleges. You can then fly to Chicago, see the beautiful scenery, the Great Lakes, and then you go to California, see the Pacific Ocean. Isn't the United States the most amazing place in the world? You can also fly to this country, get off the airplane and go directly into poverty-stricken Bronx, then go directly to the west side of Chicago, poverty-stricken, go to tribal reservations, see the poverty. Isn't America the worst country in the world? No, America is both. And Israel is both, and I think the obligation is to see the beauty and recognize the beauty and appreciate the great things, but also look at the shortcomings. And any country has many, many shortcomings, and do your best to heal the shortcomings. I've seen the occupation divide up the West Bank in ways that simply seem ridiculous and terrible. I've seen the brutality of what occupation means and how hard it is, and I've talked to Israeli soldiers about it who feel the exact same way.
As we chatted, a group of protesters heading to a larger pro-Palestine rally, where I'd be heading next, passed by. Something that I think happened just there now was kind of interesting. So there was most of that protest, what came around, holding up peace signs to here, but there was one man who was turning in and was saying, stop bombing babies in Gaza, and seemed angry. And he kind of assumed, because he saw Jews here, that this was, not a peace protest. So what do you think about that and sort of the potential rise of anti-Semitism and making assumptions about what Jews do or don't think in that context?
Well, you asked me what I feel. Makes me feel very sad. Makes me feel very, very sad. The whole subject of anti-Semitism makes me very, very sad, and I have nothing intelligent to say about it. I've read a lot about anti-Semitism, and I think irrational hatred is incomprehensible, precisely because it's irrational. There's nothing rational about anti-Semitism, and that's what makes it incomprehensible. It's an emotion that is describable, but it is not understandable.
So, if you could talk to that guy who clearly made assumptions, what would you tell him?
That I would hope we could find a middle ground. That I could hope we could find a way for free Israel and free Palestine, two states living in peace. And I would share with him, excuse me, from the memoirs of Amos Oz, who, an Israeli writer, who grew up hearing stories that his father told and his grandfather told, that in Europe he would see signs, Jews out of Europe. In growing up in pre-state Palestine before 1948, Amos and his father would see signs that say, Jews out of Palestine, and his father would say, not here, not there, then where? And it seems to me there has to be a place on earth where it's safe to always be a Jew, and that's why I'm a committed Zionist.
To what extent do you think, do you see like a diversity of political views making up this movement when you protest?
I do not know if the politics of the people here on most issues is diverse. This is probably a pro-movement on environmental issues in terms of global warming, that kind of thing. This probably sees a consensus sense on immigration policy for this country, on anti-racist policies, inclusive policies, on GLBTQ+. So on those kinds of things, this is the progressive side of, or the liberal side of the American political spectrum. And I also think, specifically in terms of anti-Semitism, I think this is a group, I regard this as a group that wants to defend the liberalism and the principles of the Enlightenment, which I think is very, very, very important. So as the right is trying to ban books, where they come to ban books, they also go after Jews. And I think this group is a bulwark against anti-Semitism.
Next, I headed down to what was by far the day's largest protest under the banner of the Answer Coalition, a leftist anti-war group first founded in the early 2000s to protest against the U.S. invasion of Iraq. This is the protest from which the small group of flag-burning and vandalizing radicals would split off after its completion. However, the protest was highly diverse and included a handful of individuals waving American flags. Perhaps the largest contingent present were members of Jewish Voices for Peace, who played a leading role in organizing the rally, with Muslims as a close second, and Orthodox Jews from the anti-Zionist Neturei Karta sect also being present. Far-left socialist and communist groups were well represented, with signs from the Party for Socialism and Liberation held more than any others. There were also Queers for Palestine, with one sign reading Fags for Hamas. I didn't see any actual Hamas flags myself, but other journalists appear to have found two individuals who were carrying them. On stage, organizers from the United Auto Workers and the American Postal Workers Union spoke, as did a Gazan refugee and actress Susan Sarandon. As I explored, I found one pro-Israel protester, with a group of pro-Palestine protesters covering his sign with their own, as police kept watch close by. By far the most radical sign I found at the protest was this one, a photo of which has since gone viral online. I asked him to explain his views.
Yeah, so my name is, I go by the name Abu Mujaddid, and I am a Muslim, first of all. I would consider myself an Islamic activist. I stand for many different issues. I've been an activist for the last, I would say, more than 20 years. And I always try to stand as much as I can to my ability for any type of injustice that as a Muslim, that my creator tells me to stand up for. So whether it be the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, I partook in one of the first protests against the war in Afghanistan, headed by Bush at that time when he launched the war. In the first week of the war in Afghanistan, I was in 42nd Street, Grand Central. I protested against the war when pretty much the entire U.S. Mindset was on one direction. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is that I've been an activist. I stand up for issues variety of issues, social, economical, political issues. So this is who I am, and I'm here today to basically stand up against the invitation of Benjamin Netanyahu, who has come here, where I feel that I have to speak out against him on many fronts, for many different reasons. You know, obviously the first one being that he is a genocidal maniac throughout his history, and I've been partaking in a lot of the protests and demonstrations that has partaken in against Israel and the Zionist entity throughout the years. So Benjamin Netanyahu, Ariel Sharon, they're not new to me. I've been in these protests. I always try to raise my voice as much as I can, but it's mainly in New York. So I'm originally from New York. I traveled here to partake in this because this is where the genocidal maniac is present, and he is giving a speech to Congress using my tax money to justify a lot more funds that he wants from my pockets to kill innocent people. You want to hold this for a second?
But I will say she is a long-time activist and organizer, originally from Brooklyn, New York, my hometown.
Yes.
Give it up for Linda Sarsour.
So we as Muslims, we believe that at the end of times, there will be a war at the end of times where the disbelievers, who are basically one of disbelievers at that time at the end of times, will be on many fronts, on many different entities. One of them will be the Zionists. I just want to clarify that it's not all Jews. A lot of the times when we make posters like these, we want it to be provocative. That's the whole point. We want to gain attention. We want it to be provocative. But if they ask us, what do we mean by that? We're very clear. We call for what Islam calls for. And in Islam, in the Quranic exegesis, during the end of times, there will be a final war. And it will be against one of the entities will be the Zionists. So right now, the Zionists are trying to expand to the greater Israel.
Don't make Islam look like we're trying to kill him, right?
No, I'm being pretty clear. So during the end of times, there will be a war, and it will be the believers versus the disbelievers. And one of the disbelievers will be the Zionists. It's as simple as that. So there's an expression here, obviously a final solution. A lot of people made reference to Hitler's times, etc. But we did this for a purpose. It's to gain attention, and that's exactly what it got. We want people to understand that I think there is a big consensus today that the Zionist entity is an entity which is recognized internationally as the enemy of humanity. So there's no one who is on, at least I can say the majority are not on the Zionist side. So now they are trying to get themselves together in the land called Israel, which they occupied, which little do they know that in Islamic prophecy, it means that they will be, a time will come when the world will fight against them, these Zionists. No one will stand by their side. So as simple as that. We do say there's a distinction between Zionists and Jews. Yes, we do say. That's why we explicitly use the word Zionist. We do not use the word Jews because we do believe there are good Jews out there. So according to the Quranic verses, there were some Jews in the past who betrayed the covenant that was set by God. They betrayed their covenant with God. They killed prophets, and they ridiculed their religion that was revealed to them. So this is what the Quran explicitly says. So they committed many violations. But in the Quran, it does say that some of the Jews were exempted from this, meaning that there were some good Jews. It doesn't mean all the Jews were the same. So I want to make that distinction. At times, sometimes you have to create provocative statements to gain attention so you can at least voice your opinion. Otherwise, sometimes you may not get noticed. So, but again, like I said, just because I use that statement, the final solution, it doesn't mean what is perceived as what Hitler did. No, that's not what we're implying here at all. So because that is a collective punishment. We don't believe in collective punishment like that. In Islam, there is no collective punishment like that. In the Quran, it explicitly states, and even in the prophetic statements, our prophet said that those people whose land has been occupied, they have the right to defend themselves. So first and foremost, it doesn't matter if the Zionists who came from Poland, from Germany to Israel to occupy Palestine, because even recently, Bella Hadid, it was just recently put on the media that Bella Hadid's parents or grandparents, they gave their houses to Jews who were in Exodus. And what did they do? They sold their land. They took their houses and did not give that back. So it doesn't matter where they came from, whether it be from Exodus, they were fleeing from Hitler's persecution. If they're occupying the land of Palestine, if they're occupying land in West Bank, they took land away from the indigenous people, they have to give that back. It doesn't matter what their history is, because they are occupiers and they usurp and they colonialize that land. So it doesn't matter if they're soft Zionists, they're good Zionists, or bad Zionists. First priority is for them to have the indigenous people of Palestine to have their land back. That's the first and foremost priority, not according to my opinion. That is what Islam says as Muslims.
As we were speaking, another man came up to us to express his intense disagreement with these Islamists.
Yeah, I don't mind. Let him speak. Let him have his opinion. I don't mind.
Well, unfortunately, when you have a right cause, like Palestinians fighting for survivor, you have idiot peoples like him who promote Islam, who are promoting genocide in the hands of Allah. Their solution is worse than what we see today. If you want to see the practical solution of what he claims, take a trip to Tehran, Iran. Go and see how the girls and women are treated in the streets of Iran, how political prisoners are being victimized, murdered, how thousands of people being slaughtered in the streets. So if someone here is pro-Hamas, pro-Khalifa, we saw them in Syria, we saw them in Iraq, we saw them in the Middle East, that their solution is more murder, more genocide. And that's something that we don't want them to be near any cause, any movement that fights for freedom, that fights for free Palestine. They want to rule according to laws of Islam, which doesn't really count for women. You can beat your wife, you can murder your wife and daughter. The Sharia law is nothing but a law that has to be abandoned, must be thrown away. And unfortunately, they give a bad name to the Palestinian cause because they are a bunch of terrorists, they are a bunch of murderers that we have seen them in action in the past. What we see here is diversity. What we see here is people from all walks of life coming in here. And this under one God, only one set of rule, goes exactly against what we see here today. I think with democracy, with democratic people getting involved and louder support Palestinians, these people will be shut up. They won't have a stage to say that the future of Palestine should be under one God, under one imam or any other idiot. If you go around, there are more people like me. One of the major organizers of this event is a Socialist party. One of the major organizers of this event is Jewish Voice for Peace. A lot of people who are here are for democracy. They want equal rights, not being ruled by one person according to the laws of 1400 years ago or Quran. I believe we don't have to be all believing in one thing. The beauty of it is that everyone has his own perspective, their own social justice, social solutions. So I'm all for diversity. I'm all for Democrats, socialists, libertarians. They all come through and figure out what to do. But today, Today we are just talking about the genocide that is going on in Palestine. And that's something that all different groups and parties can unite. Well, Hamas is a very, very small part of Palestine. And what Hamas has done in all the years by just adhering to terrorist acts have isolated Palestinians and have really hurt Palestinian cause. I think people will figure out a way out of this disaster, and they know a terrorist group like Hamas, who have tortured, put in jail the Palestinian people themselves. We have seen them. Hamas has monopoly over what goes in and what comes out of Gaza for years. So I think this is an eye-opening moment for the Palestinians and those who believe in just cause of Palestinians, that they should do a lot better than Hamas. Hamas misrepresents itself. Hamas is a terrorist government, terrorist organization, doesn't care about the lives of people, Palestinian or non-Palestinians. 2 days ago, there was a conference by majority of Palestinian groups and organizations in China. So I think Hamas influence dying out. They have to get in line if they want to survive. They have to get in line if they want to be around. I think that people of the world will force Hamas either to quit, get out of the region, or abide by international laws. So I'm very hopeful because I think Hamas is desperate. Hamas is losing its confidence. Hamas is losing its credibility. And I'm hoping the Palestinian groups, they can come up with a platform that at the top of it is interests of Palestinian people and coexistence with all others in the region.
When I expressed skepticism that Hamas was a small part of the movement, the man and a friend of his pushed back.
I would say 2%. None of them dare to openly support Hamas. They talk about free Palestine. They don't say long live Hamas. They don't really mention the name of Hamas because they know it's a lousy terrorist organization.
You ask him how many people are here pro-Hamas. I would say everybody. Say how many people in Palestine are pro-Hamas. Just imagine everybody. That doesn't mean anything. Because in Palestine, in Gaza, whoever is against Hamas, they're going to cut off their head. So it's like in Iran. In Iran, if you are against the government of Iran, they're going to cut your head off. So even being pro-Hamas doesn't mean anything. You can be pro-Hamas, be a fascist. A lot of people were pro-Hitler in Germany. They all were wrong. So that doesn't mean anything. Because Hamas is a terrorist organization who does not allow anybody against him.
Most important thought that I want you to go away with it is that the Iranian government is a false friend for Palestinians. For months they didn't do anything. As soon as Israelis murdered a couple of their generals in Syria, they started sending missiles toward Israel. That shows that they care about their own interests and not about the Palestinians. So they are a false friend, and I want everyone to know, don't rely on Iran for anything, because Iran is also a murderous government, a government that Iranian people are trying to overthrow.
After hearing a radical Islamist and anti-Islamist perspective, I wanted to get what I hoped would be a view more representative of the norm among Muslims. So I went to speak with an activist tabling for an Islamic group.
My name is Azad, and here from the local DMV area. and we are familiar with the protest and the stopping of the genocide. We came out here because we wanted to stop the genocide, stop people from speaking, letting these genociders speak, and inviting them to with our tax dollars in this country. We wanted to make sure that our voice should be heard. And we are here with Why Islam, introducing Islam to the community as well. Islam came to establish justice and to bring people together. One of the primary goals of the Muslims is to be able to live peacefully with our neighbors and our families. This is a historical fact where the Jews were allowed to stay and live within the Muslims in the community for years and years. It goes back to 637 AD, where the Muslims invited the Jews after they were kicked out by the Babylonians, and they were invited back into Palestine when the Muslims were ruling there. After the 1099 war, the Muslims invited back the Jews again. And this is an ongoing support. You see that the Muslims and Jews are living, used to live before the 1948 takeover of the Palestine. And Muslims were living peacefully with the Jewish community. To be honest with you, I think people are not getting the fair news and the real news. That we have 160-something thousand people that are dead, and we're still worried about whether people that are in prison or people that are out there, or schools are being bombed, churches are being bombed, hospitals are being bombed, and they're asking about, do you condone this, or are you siding with these groups of people? So Islam has always been for justice, and in our Quran it tells us to stand up for justice even if it's against ourselves, our family, or our children. You know, one of the things that actually we should look into is history between Muslims and Jews. Muslims, when they were ruling Spain for 800 years, the Jews were safe there. In Iran, the Jews are safe there. In Medina, when the Muslims were ruling, the Jews were safe there. Palestine before 1948, the Jewish community was living there. They were safe. I gave you an example of when Umar ibn Khattab, the second caliph, came to Palestine. He brought the Jews back. When Salahuddin took back Palestine from the Crusaders, he invited the Jews back. So Jews and Muslims have been living peacefully here in America. Muslims and Jews are living peacefully. Everywhere else, Muslims and Jews are living peacefully. Netanyahu, right before the October 7th and October 6th, there was a massive protest in front of his house. 400,000 people were protesting because they wanted to get rid of him. He's a war criminal, he's a thief, he's a liar. And as soon as this protest happened, next day, you see there's a stand down in Gaza for 8 hours, 7 hours. The military did nothing, and then we're supposed to believe that they did not know anything that was going on here. Their agenda was to get rid of the Palestinians and to get rid of the Muslims from the land, so they can build more occupation, they can build more territories and settlements for their people. If you look at some right when Netanyahu was speaking to the United Nations, he had a map of what the new Israel is going to be, and part of that map was Palestine was off the map, and they found second largest gas reserves right off the coast of Gaza, and they're building. Grazing the ground. They're already starting to do this. I mean, there's so much financial investment for them to be able to do this, and God knows why they want to do this. In addition to this, I mean, it's a self-destruction anyways. You're killing people, and you expect them and their children and their grandchildren and the community to stand down and not to be able to stand up to this. They're killing themselves. The solution is, first of all, we have to be able to build a state where each person has a right to vote, We have to get rid of these war criminals first and foremost. We have to get rid of Netanyahu. We have to get rid of the Zionist ideology that is there, that this is only a place for Zionists. It belongs to the Palestinians. The Palestinian has a right to return. You have 1 million Palestinians, plus you have that has been kicked out. Now you have 2 million Palestinians from Gaza has been kicked out now. They need to come back to their land. We need to give back the land to the Palestinians and establish a just social system for everyone to live in. We have a country, we have a leader that has been killing 180,000 people. We women and children, and bombing schools and bombing hospitals and bombing centers and bombing refugee camps. And you're asking me, Islam is the problem here? So my question is, how are we supposed to understand this if we're having one group of people claiming Islam is the problem, when all you do is bomb the Muslims, you're bombing the children, you're kicking them out of their land? The idea here is called projection. Psychologically, what we do is they become the aggressors, and they say, well, it's your fault. So this is a simple, Americans have been using this tactic for many years. They're calling people by certain names, and then they're the ones that are the most culprits in everything that they do. Biggest thing is, first of all, we have to do alternative news. We have to go read alternative news. Stop with the mainstream media. They're giving us biased news. Thank God for TikTok right now. We're being able to get some real news of what's going on. We can see the genocide. We'll be able to understand it, read alternative sources, abandon the mainstream media, and support small groups and media outlet like yourself and other people that are doing this work. Tremendous amount of props for you for coming out here. Free Palestine. Palestine will be free, and our kids and our grandkids will thank us when we're done and gone in our graves for such a wonderful things, because we are standing up for them now.
Shortly after this conversation, the rally portion of the protest wrapped up, switching into a march east towards the Capitol building. On my way to the march, I spoke with the leader of a group of doctors attending the protest.
I am the co-founder of Doctors Against Genocide, and we are a community of doctors who are unifying the voices of the doctors, nurses, healthcare workers to oppose genocide, oppose war crimes, oppose crimes against humanity. And we are here because we are protesting the arrival of Netanyahu, who overseen the genocide in Gaza that decimated children and their families and the whole health community in Gaza. And we are shocked that he is even invited. We want to show our colleagues that we are speaking up against genocide and genocide perpetrators. We want to tell our politicians that the medical community is opposed to what they are doing in DC, supporting a genocide in Gaza. And we want to tell any community, especially Gaza, that we are thinking of them, we stand against genocide, and we will fight until it ends. Our vision is to end genocide, and our vision is to end dehumanization and injustice, because all these things are determinants of health. If we are able to remove hatred, remove injustice, remove discrimination, and remove dehumanization, we will live in a much better world, and all these are prerequisites for peace. And I think peace is the natural existence between people. So we are 100% behind peace that is built on human rights and that is built on the absence of dehumanization and injustice. I want doctors to be engaged in issues that affects health globally, and not limit ourselves to humanitarian aid and not limit ourselves to our clinics where we see one patient at a time. There are issues that affect the globe, that affects the whole Earth, and we need to be involved in climate change, we need to be involved in justice, we need to be involved in opposing wars everywhere and making the planet healthy for everyone.
As I went to follow the march, I witnessed police put on gas masks. Where I was at the time, towards the back of the march, there were no signs of any disturbances. And seeing police ready themselves for tear gas angered many of the protesters. At police advice, I avoided following the march for the time being and instead went to observe two smaller protests. The first, the smallest of the day, was an explicitly socialist protest where speakers discussed Trotsky and detailed aspects of Marxist theory.
First, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mohammed. I represent the World Socialist Party. And we are here to actually tell the people that the working class is a fighting force against, capitalism and actually imperialist war. And we are trying to actually raise the consciousness of the people to understand that you actually have power and strength. You can't be a Zionist and being socialist at the same time. It wouldn't make any sense. Well, one of my main goals is to actually raise the consciousness of people, to make them actually understand you have the power and the will to stand up against this capitalist system. Now, my second one is, of course, to end the genocide in Gaza, and also the third one is actually to end American imperialism across the world, and taking resources from different countries, especially from the Middle East.
My takeaway from talking to Mohammed and watching the speakers for a short time was that more than this protest was about Netanyahu or Palestinians, it was about trying to pick off the many socialists from the larger protest and draw them deeper into Marxist theory. But the next protest I attended had the exact opposite energy. Organized by the group Combatants for Peace, it was laser focused on ending the conflict. Based in both Israel and the Palestinian territories, I spoke with the group's American liaison.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Goodwin Van Camp. I'm the Executive Director of American Friends of Combatants for Peace. American Friends of Combatants for Peace is the American arm of a joint Israeli-Palestinian nonviolent movement made up of former fighters who have laid down their weapons and chosen the way of nonviolence to co-resist the occupation and to fight for a future of collective liberation. I'm here with the Peace and Justice Bloc. We are a coalition of multiple organizations and groups. We are Palestinians, Israelis, Arabs, Jews, and allies who are here to protest not only Netanyahu and his visit to Congress, but also the war. We are calling for a ceasefire, a prisoner and hostage deal, an end to the occupation, collective liberation, and safety for all Israelis and Palestinians from the river to the sea. So one thing that's unique about our group is that we are a cross-border movement of Palestinians in the West Bank and Israelis in Israel. That Netanyahu is saying that peace is impossible and that Israelis and Palestinians cannot live in peace, that they cannot love each other. We embody the very opposite. We are a movement of those who were once most committed to violence, top-ranking soldiers and generals, colonels, lieutenants in the IDF, and Palestinians who had participated in the violence, many of whom did many years in Israeli military prison for their violent resistance. They've all gone through a personal transformation where they came to the end of the road of violence by seeing what it really did, not just to their societies, but to themselves, to their humanity, to their families, and what it was doing to the future and the destiny of their land. So it took a lot of courage, it took a lot of faith to try something that had never been done, to reach across the border to the enemy, to the other, and to decide to start meeting in secret and see if there could be some commonality. And what they found is there is commonality. There is a love for life, for humanity. There is a desire for freedom and safety and peace. And they realized that their only way to achieve that was together, that their destinies were interwoven, that their futures were intertwined, and that violence was only going to rob them of life and hope and a future. So they have found hope and life and future in each other and through another way. The government, Israel, is absolutely committed to othering and to keeping societies apart from each other because they know if they come together, if they actually meet and get to hear each other's stories, they will love each other. They will see each other's humanity, and they will find a way to fight against the occupation and against the systems of power that are putting people in places of fear and robbing them of their power and their lives. So I think what we've learned in the movement is, one, to build joint civil society where people can actually meet and can actually hear each other's stories, can actually spend time together and begin to share life and begin to navigate the power imbalances and to deal with the issues at hand while getting to know each other in community and friendship. The other thing is, you can't just talk. Dialogue is not enough. There has to be a way to do something. And with our movement, we're a movement of co-resistance and co-creation. So we do nonviolent activism. We protest together. We do samud with Palestinian communities in solidarity. We do campaigns internationally. We have 2 freedom schools, one for Israelis and one for Palestinians. We're training the next generation of nonviolent leaders. And we're doing something while we're working on relationship and transformation. We're finding a way to take social and political action together as a joint civil society. I come from a conservative, evangelical Christian background. We didn't even know there was a Palestine. My church that I grew up in used to do solidarity tours or just tours to Israel. And I was never taught about those who lived in the West Bank in Gaza. The first time I went to the land, my parents were afraid, because I was going to the West Bank, that I would die by the hands of a terrorist Arab. There are so many lies that are keeping us in boxes. They are enslaving us. They are not true. I am now a part of a large and ever-expanding, diverse civil society of the most beautiful people I've met in my life: Palestinians, Israelis, Arabs, Jews, and allies. And all this othering that we've been taught to do, it hurts us. Life is different, more rich. We have more power. We can control our destinies more when we reach across the aisle, walk across the wall, step over that border, and meet with each other. And we all have the opportunity to do that. So I encourage everyone to get out of your bubble and to go connect with those who you think might be the enemy. I also want to say that there's this picture that to be a part of a group like this, you have to be some someone radical, some extremist, some far lefty. We are a group who is finding a third path where you don't have to be pro-Israel or pro-Palestine. You can be pro your most intrinsic human values. You can be pro-peace, pro-justice, pro-human rights, pro the rights of children to live and thrive. You can be pro-love. You can be pro-humanity, and you can walk with us. You can join us. You don't have to alienate or hurt anyone, and we can call others in to join us as well by connecting with each other and dismantling these ideas, these rigid binary black and white ideas of an other. There is no other. All we need to do is reach out and find each other and see we are the same. Here as American citizens, the impact that we have on this place, Christians, and especially the evangelical community, are a primary funder through AIPAC, through the settlement project. Christians are funding the rupture, the injustice in the land. And once, I believe, if people could really see, as humans, everyday people, everyday Christians could see what's happening in the name of our faith and in the name of our God, and happening to others in this land that we say we have an affinity with, once we see that, I think that once we know the truth, in alignment with our values that we preach and that we try to practice, there is no choice but to try to do what is right and honorable before God, and to support this work of peace and justice and dignity and love in this land. And with our U.S. tax dollars, if you have no faith, it doesn't matter. With our U.S. tax dollars, we are destroying precious lives, and we are creating regional instability that could impact the entire world. That is a choice, whether through complicity or through very active direct endorsement, but we have another choice. That is to challenge that, to co-resist that, and to work here in the U.S. to change hearts, minds, policy and the actions of our government to make peace in that land, to support peace and to support justice instead of war and insecurity which threatens us all.
After finishing seeing all the protests, I went back to try to follow the march. But with police driving past and protesters standing idly along multiple blocks, it became clear the police had dispersed it. On my way past the Capitol building, I spoke with one of the protest organizers to learn what happened.
We were marching up Constitution Avenue towards the Capitol building, protesting the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu has been receiving a hero's welcome inside the U.S. Capitol. When we got to Constitution in Louisiana, we said we should have the right to go up Constitution Avenue. It's our First Amendment right. This is the U.S. Congress. It's not Fort Netanyahu. And at that moment, the police attacked us. They started pushing us, then physically beating on people, and then pepper spraying us. The whole front row, maybe 30 of us, were badly pepper sprayed. We're up and standing right now, but for quite some time you couldn't see, couldn't walk, couldn't do anything because it was a pretty strong attack from the police. I was on a bullhorn and I said we have the right to march on Constitution Avenue. And at that moment they started shoving us, started pushing people back, and we never, the demonstration was completely peaceful, and the police just started pepper spraying people. All the people in the front were pepper sprayed, and they were obviously intent on dispersing the crowd.
I tried to ask another question about the nature of the incident, beginning to ask if the march had needed to seek permits for their route, but as I did, a loud police car passed by, and the organizer said he had to leave.
I'm gonna go. Stuff's is happening up there, I gotta go.
Okay, thank you. I can't know the truth, but being familiar with leftist protest tactics, I suspect the march organizers may have wanted to incite force against themselves for its attention-grabbing and sympathy-gaining value. It's unlikely, however, that the march organizers sought the flag burning and vandalism that I later learned happened a few blocks further down, which overshadowed any sympathy for the protesters that might have been gained from coverage of the pepper spray and tear gassing. With the protesters dispersed over many blocks, I and many of the protesters wouldn't learn about that vandalism until after departing and seeing it all over social media. Instead, before I left, I spoke with one final protester whose sign grabbed my eye.
My story is what I see every day on television and what is happening to the children in Gaza. This was my life in Germany as a Jewish child, and at the mercy of the Allied bombs, America and the Brits bombing the civilian section of Hamburg, Germany, the worst bombing in the war in Europe, and I'm a Holocaust survivor. So I am distressed. I am an angry, disappointed Jewish woman that Israel and America have not worked at making peace. Instead, America has supported Israel's now genocidal oppression, something that they have done for 7 decades. I have been an activist all of my life for peace. I have also written many letters for decades to the different Palestinian administrations protesting the treatment of their Semitic neighbors. And I think ideally, and I realize that at my age I probably ought not to have idealistic views, but in my view, the only way that Israel can exist if it immediately stops its slaughter in Gaza and its settlement occupation in the West Bank. It cannot continue the way it is going, it will be the destruction of Israel. It will also be a danger to every Jewish person in the world, because we will be tarred with the Israeli brush because we are Jews. So we are going to be held responsible. And we have a double burden. We are also American. So as a naturalized American Jewish citizen, I bear an extremely urgent obligation to protest what our government is doing, to protest what Israel is doing and has been doing. This is unacceptable. And I think that the truest words spoken since October were Guterres' words when he said October 7th did not happen in a vacuum. It did not. You cannot expect to oppress people without eventually that dam will burst. Even in concentration camps, people protested and got killed for it, but they rose up against their oppressors. And this is, in my mind, something that was foreseeable from decades ago, that this cannot go on. Israel has made wars against neighbors. In 1980, Israel killed refugees in Shatila and Sabra in Lebanon, killing refugees from land that Israel was occupying. So I want Israel to make peace. I want Israel to get rid of its current racist, fascist government and deal with people in Israel who want peace. And there are very, very many Israelis who want peace, who do not want to go along with what is happening. My Holocaust experience is what the Gaza children are experiencing. So I went through the same thing, running for 10 days and 10 nights through bombs and a firestorm, and not being allowed in a bomb shelter because we were Jewish. We were thrown out of a church. I was not allowed to go to school. We were dispossessed the same way Israel is dispossessing Palestinians. The Nazis did that to Jews. And so I relive my childhood now on a daily basis, and I have PTSD as a result of it, because I see that nothing has been learned. We're doing the same thing. We resort to making war. I was lucky that I did not share the fate of my Jewish family who were murdered in 1941. And I was only saved, I'm a pacifist, but war saved me from a gas chamber. And a very ironic twist of fate. And then the Allies bombed the city of Hamburg. It was the epicenter of the worst bombing in the Second World War in Europe, and the worst firestorm the world has ever seen. So I see repeated the same thing, only with better weapons, and so far no gas ovens, but the violence and brutality is the same. And it is disturbing that Jews are doing it. For me as a Jew, I find it personally a very, very heavy burden. We went into hiding because there were thousands of bodies that couldn't be identified, and our hiding place was a tar paper shack and an earthen dugout. And we were, my father and mother were part of the communist underground, and so underground, our hiding place was organized through the underground, and that's how we stayed alive. When I was very young, as a 9.5-year-old, I wanted to go and be part of making a land of peace for Jews, and I very much wanted to go until a meeting of I was part of what is called the Children of Blankenese, and there was Zionist groups rounded up Holocaust survivors, children, and one of the organizers suggested that Israel needed intelligent young women to make sons, and that's when I gave up on the idea of going to Palestine to make a country, because I realized that that was not my idea of what I wanted to do. So, and anyway.
What to learn from all of this? First, the entire truth can never be captured in a simple narrative. The protesters were not all one thing, and they certainly weren't all violent, flag-burning vandals. While they were overwhelmingly left-wing socialists, that couldn't be said for all of them, and the form and intensity of that socialism varied substantially. And, while the vast majority were pro-peace, not all of them were. But even the most publicly radical and anti-peace protester wasn't directing his extremism in exactly the direction you might expect. Muslims and Jews were both dramatically overrepresented, and they ranged from secular to extremely devout. The media and the right-of-center echo chamber focused in on one thing about these protests, and that's what happened at the very end. I don't think that attention was entirely misplaced, but it was incomplete. I remember the Black Lives Matter riots in the summer of 2020, and the hollow defense that those protests were mostly peaceful. They were, in fact, mostly peaceful, but to ignore the riots, as the left too often did, was to ignore the devastating impact they had upon countless Americans, and in effect to sanction and enable their continuance, leading to weeks of chaos and destruction that killed more people than the names Black Lives Matter chanted in memory of. Yet, to ignore the truth of the mostly peaceful nature was to ignore the primary political energy behind them, causing Republicans who focused entirely on the riots to be ineffective at stopping that energy from getting converted into policy. Conversely, January 6th was painted by the media as being entirely violent, but the majority who were at the Capitol that day attempting to peacefully protest got ignored. Being a person capable of acting effectively in the world means being able to see and understand all of it, and not adopting a narrative that pushes out that complexity. Narratives that entirely dismiss protest movements as comprised of violent extremists seek to defeat them and their cause. If your goal is winning at all costs, that strategy might make sense. But if you want to make peace with your opponents, you need to understand where they're coming from. The conflict between Zionists and Palestinians has been raging for a century. Neither side can obtain a total victory against the other without a genocide. For the majority of Palestinians, Israelis, and us, who would prefer to avoid that, it's important we seek out the complex truth and avoid the simple narratives of those whose goal is annihilation. I noticed this opportunity in particular when speaking to the Muslim Proselytizer. I asked him questions to try to see how well he understood the narrative that I know to be in the heads of Israelis and Israel supporters. And I don't think he got it quite right, including believing in a couple of conspiracy theories and getting details wrong about the war. Yet he seemed to be someone of moderate personality, with good intentions, who Jews in Israel could reason with if only he understood their narrative better and they better understood his. I was particularly impressed by combatants for peace, who were pursuing precisely this type of project. Nonetheless, I was genuinely concerned by much of the radicalism I saw. The only transparently clear Islamist I saw was the one I spoke with, But Marxist communism was common, albeit in a more naive form than at the theory-heavy but tiny socialist protest. On stage at the larger protest, one speaker led the crowd in chanting "Workers of the world, unite," and another embraced the authoritarian regimes of Cuba and Venezuela. I worry that many people were at the protest for the wrong reason, knowing few details about the Palestinian situation, but holding a messianic view of a world free of Western imperialism and joining the protest for the same reasons a religious person attends church. In this leftist religion, the vandals were the faith's zealots, more extreme than their co-religionists, but proving the danger that lies within its doctrine. That's a societal problem that urgently needs solving, and it's completely independent of anything to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I want people to support the Palestinian cause because I believe it's right. But as the anti-Islamist Iranian I spoke to noted, when you have a right cause, it can attract people who want to use the cause to push a larger and worse agenda. Most of the activists I met at the protests were good advocates for Palestinians, but there were many present who clearly weren't. Ultimately, that led to a situation where the protest backfired at persuading the public, culminating in a denunciation across media and politics going all the way up to Kamala Harris. If, going forward, protesters can put the Palestinian cause at the forefront, working to understand the conflict, how to persuade, and how to achieve political change, great things can be accomplished. But if they instead protest to fulfill personal psychological needs, virtue signal to their co-religionists in a far-left faith, and co-opt the Palestinian cause for something else, the good work of the cause's actual advocates will be undermined and Palestinians will lose. I hope we can avoid that. For more content like this, please subscribe to The Black Sheep at wetheblacksheep.com.